Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Sabbath. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker, Karelle Spence. Karelle was born in Jamaica, grew up in New York, and eventually migrated to Miami, Florida. Karelle, when it comes to stroke management, and stroke and beyond, is an expert. She actually is a resident expert at Jackson North Medical Center. She was also a stroke educator at the Jackson Memorial Hospital. So, guys, you are in for a big and really when it comes to like wondering what's going to happen, how come I have stroke, or what's going on in our brain when you have a stroke, Karelle will be able to articulate it. Karelle has been managing our stroke program at the Jackson North Medical Center, and nurses, staff, physicians, and patients' family and patients are really truly admiring her passion for ensuring that our stroke patients are well taken care of while in the hospital and beyond is really, I'm so proud of you, Karelle. I'm not gonna get the thunder from you because I know that you will be explaining everything about stroke and also be telling everybody about yourself as well. Thank you, Karelle, and thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you guys for having me. Happy Sabbath to you all. Hello to the people online. I appreciate you guys logging on today. Are you guys able to hear me okay? Yes? All right. Thank you guys for just giving me a little bit of your time today. More volume. All right. So don't get mad at me if I get too loud now, okay? Thank you guys for having me here today. And if you don't remember anything that I'm going to say today, I want you to remember two things. Two things. One, you should know already, God is always in control, no matter what happens, right? But two, God wants you to always be fast. Be fast, okay? As I go through this talk, feel free to ask questions, but I'm going to break down what does be fast mean and what does that mean in my world? What does that mean to the patient? What does that mean to the family members who might be seeing it? And what I've learned now, because this year I decided I was going to be a Girl Scout troop leader, what does it mean to the children who see this? Everything that we talk about today, you can apply for yourself, you can apply for your friends, you can apply for your family, but you can also teach it to your children so they could be your first set of eyes, okay? So what is a stroke anyway, okay? A stroke, very simple, very easy, is a sudden loss of blood supply to the brain, okay? It's typically caused by one of two things, a blockage in the vessel, which we call ischemic strokes. So there's a clot, no blood is flowing to this air, tissue starts to die. Why? It's not being fed. It's not getting blood and oxygen and all the good things that the brain needs to feed itself. The other cause of it is a break in the vessel. Those are the bleeding strokes. Vessels sometimes, like cars, have wear and tear. Okay? After a long period of time of stress or sometimes age, we have spots in our vessels that become a lot weaker than other areas. So you might have a break, and this is where we now limit the supply of blood to a particular part of the brain, and this is now where we start to have stroke symptoms. So remember, you're going to always, come on now, say it with me. You're going to be fast. All right, so what is be fast? What does that mean? So be fast is a very simple acronym that tells us, the healthcare providers, some very easy stroke symptoms. But it tells you, hey, I should be concerned. Hey, I should probably call 911. Hey, we should probably get this person in front of a medical professional, a medical provider, to make sure, is this what we think is happening? So be fast. So when I want to tell you guys something. When I started stroke way back when, Melanie found me and said, hey, you should be a stroke coordinator, come on over. It used to just be fast. Fast starts for face, arms, speech, and time, okay? Over the past couple of years, a stroke neurologist, CDC, World Health Organization has been looking at common stroke symptoms, and what we've been asked to do is now incorporate B, balance and vision. Why? Because those strokes, they go down very quickly. Patients come in, and it's very often that sometimes we kind of miss the signs, and we think it's something completely different. So a patient might come in, you know, I woke up my normal self. I got out of bed, I made coffee, I made tea, or I like porridge, I made some porridge. I brushed my teeth, I got myself dressed, I felt my regular self, nothing different. But as I was walking past the mirror, I noticed my face looks a little different. And then I went to talk to my husband, and he says, well, why are you talking like that? And it's not because I've been standing in front of him for an hour talking. It's because something is different about my speech. It might even be a little slurred, right? And then, you know, I notice my arm's kind of weak, or it feels kind of tingly. That is your time to be fast, okay? I always like to tell people time is brain. So I fight with the cardiologist sometimes because they say, well, the heart is the most important vessel or organ in the body. And I say, no, it's not. It's the brain. It's the brain. Why? Because brain tissue dies very, very quickly if a stroke occurs, something like a stroke occurs, where it's not being fed properly. Once an infarct happens, after the first 10 minutes, brain tissue starts to die. For every single minute, every 60 seconds that pass, that is 2 million brain neurons that are lost that we can't give back to you, okay? It's gone, right? So you have an area of the brain, as minutes go by, you have an infarcted area that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And this is where we see more deficits starting to happen. So it is very, very important that when you feel the symptoms, the single most important thing that you can do is always consider time. For me, I always tell my patients it is time to call 911, time to get to the hospital. Well, Karelle, why call 911? So in this area and most areas that you will go to, EMS has a system worked out with the hospital. When they see certain things occurring in a patient, they'll call the hospital and say, hey, I have a stroke alert. I just got a text message a minute ago from my hospital that says, you've got a stroke alert in the ED, patients here, please run now. That allows us as a team to now mobilize and be prepared for you. And we're gonna ask you all type of silly questions, and we're gonna put you in a big machine, and we're gonna take a picture of your brain, and we're not going to pinpoint what type of symptoms you are, what your brain looks like, and what is going on, so we can better lead you. So now that I've given you the crazy and the scary news, I want to tell you something really, really, really important, more important than anything else. Strokes are 86% preventable. You guys had a great speaker today, and he said a lot of good things. He said whole, lean diet, meatless diet, limiting stress, making sure you are really, really taking care of the system, right? Because the computer works really good, but sometimes things that go on in the system can affect the computer, right? So I want to tell you why strokes are 86% preventable. I like to talk about risk factors. How do I know if I'm at risk for a stroke? So there's two types of risk factors: modifiable, non-modifiable. What I can change, what you're stuck with, okay? So let's talk about the ones that we're stuck with. There's nothing you can do about it except live with it, pray about it, and hope that, you know what? It works out best in my favor, but at the end of the day, God's will always be done, right? Right. So age, okay? Over the age of 55, your risk for stroke doubles every 10 successive years. So 55, 65, 75, and so on. I like to sometimes try to turn the clock on my age backwards, but it doesn't really happen, right? But we live with it, we'll work with it, okay? Race. Race is really a big one for us. African Americans and Hispanics are at increased risk for having a stroke. Why? Because we're more predisposed to hypertension and diabetes. This is something that we are genetically predisposed. So think about your family. Who's had hypertension, who's had diabetes, anybody with high cholesterol, we're naturally predisposed to this, okay? And also our diets play an interesting role in this. I went to Jamaica recently and I was talking about stroke, and I'm like, well, stroke is the #1 cause of death in Jamaica. With a population that's about the size of Miami-Dade, that's scary. So they go, well, we eat so well. I'm like, but do we eat so well? Because my rice and peas has coconut milk, and then I fry the chicken and all of these things. Well, naturally, diet has a role to play with it, but we are genetically predisposed. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, you guys are more at risk for stroke than women, especially after the age of 35. So it's really, really important. I always tell my guys, hey, please make sure you're following up with your doctor. You're considering your diet. Am I eating what I need to eat, okay? And if it does result in you having to be on a medication, you're taking the medication just as ordered, okay? The last non-modifiable risk factor, or the one that I cannot change, is family history. Very, very, very important. I always like to use myself as an example. I do not call myself a walking risk factor. I call myself a walking billboard to help spread awareness on it, but I like to use myself as an example. I have 3 grandparents that have had a stroke. 3, okay? We have a family history of hypertension. We have a family history of diabetes. We have a family history of high cholesterol. So remember I said genetics a second ago, and I said family history, and I said just being an African American, right? So those are some of the things that I really can't change. But when I think about my modifiables, or the things that I can change, which we'll talk about in a second, those are gonna be the ones that are gonna help support you to make sure that you are keeping your risk factor as low as possible, okay? So when you leave today, I want you to think about that. What are my risk factors? What are the ones that I know I can't change? Accept it, pray about it, and just know that is the special part of you that makes you you, okay? So let's talk about the risk factors that you can change. What can you do something about? Hypertension. Hypertension, no one likes it. We all deal with it. You know someone who knows someone who knows someone who probably has high blood pressure, correct? What are we doing about it? Can we fix high blood pressure? Absolutely, absolutely. Lifestyle changes, change in the diet, right? Maybe I cannot eat fried foods every single day. Maybe once a week is okay. And then I'll wean it down eventually, right? Medication management. Well, I have a lot of patients that come in and says, I really don't want to be on medications. My next conversation is, I want you to show me your diet. What is everything you eat in a day, and what's all the exercise you do in a day? Because it all can be controlled, but it does require a lifestyle change. So hypertension, number one advocate for having a stroke, okay? Diabetes, anyone heard of it? Kind of goes hand in hand with hypertension. They seem to kind of sometimes be married to each other. Also not a favorite, but very, very common, especially in our communities, right? And we have some what we've been seeing recently is we have a lot of brittle diabetics. They're coming in with blood sugars that are 500, 600 on waking up in the morning. So what are we doing again? What are the lifestyle changes that we're making to reduce those blood sugars? Are we actually changing the diet? Are we working out every day? The recommendation by the American Heart Association is 30 minutes at least 4 times a week. I'm working on that, and Melanie will tell you I count my steps, and at lunch I do walk the parking lot just to make sure I get my 30 minutes in a day. But what are the things that we can do? So this is something that we can actually fix. We have to put a little bit more effort into it, but we can. High cholesterol, same as hypertension and diabetes, is modifiable, can be adjusted, always making sure that you're making those lifestyle changes. So one of the things that I always tell my patients is, these are the things that you have to start to have the conversation with your provider about now, okay? Smoking, sedentary lifestyle, a heart condition called AFib and aflutter. These all fall under the category of modifiable risk factors. So if you go on the American Heart Association, they have a cool chart that says, know your risk factors, and it literally is a checkbox that says, yes, I have it, no, and what your score is. So if you have it, you check the box, and you tally it up, and it tells you, are you at high risk, are you at low risk, or you have no risk, you should be okay. Go and find this and look for it. Ask Take it for yourself and then have this conversation and ask your doctor, what are my risks? Should I be worried? And what can we start to plan today to reduce my risk tomorrow? Because remember, I said stroke is 86% preventable, and that's just by managing the risk factors. Now, I will not ever stand in front of anyone and say it is absolutely preventable, 100%. If you do all of these things, it will never happen to you. Because sometimes God has plans, different plans for our lives, right? And sometimes we have these eye openers that do occur, but guess what? Sometimes how you come out on the other side, you are a better person than when you went in, right? We all agree on that, okay? So it still can happen. So before anything, I want you to always know your risk factors, modifiable and non-modifiable, and we're always gonna remember be fast. I jumped around a little bit and I kind of went to the time, but I want to talk about the symptoms, all of the symptoms, because some of them are straight on and some of them are a little bit of a gray area, okay? Sudden changes in balance. You wake up, everyone walked in perfectly fine. But let's say have you ever been on a boat and it's kind of swaying? If it's your first time, it kind of feels like, gravity's got a hold of you and it's gonna let you go very soon. You can't find your center. You can't find that good, strong positioning. It almost feels like you're rocking. If this suddenly happens to you, I didn't wake up with this, I haven't had it for 3 weeks. I woke up my normal self and all of a sudden, I felt like I was on the worst ride of my life. This is something you need to pay attention to. Sudden changes in vision. Now, I'm not talking about, okay, I lost my glasses and I can't see. I have 20/20 vision, or my vision is almost 20/20 with my glasses. But all of a sudden, I can't see out of one eye, both eyes, peripherally at the side, and this suddenly happened. I woke up perfectly fine, and now there's an issue with my vision, okay? Facial droop. One of the big telltale signs, okay? You wanna always look at the face, look at the mouth, look at the eyebrows, very easy, okay? I always tell my patients, I want you to close your eyes real tight and open them real wide. I'm looking at those eyebrows. Do they close? Do they go up and down the same way? I look at the mouth. I tell patients, smile. No, this is not a happy time and this is not a joke, but we want to see, do both sides rise and fall symmetrically? Arms. So when I started stroke, they used to say arm weakness. I don't want anyone to ever get stuck at arm weakness. I want you to also consider inability to completely move. I cannot pick this arm up no matter what I do. I could will it, I can do anything, I can almost pick it up, but it falls right back down. Inability to move, loss of sensation. I know I'm touching the podium, but I cannot feel the podium. If I touch my right and I touch my left, well, it feels a little different on the left. That's sudden change, okay? And then, of course, weakness. Maybe I could lift something up, but I can't lift it as high as I could lift the other side. You want to consider that. Speech changes. Now, speech changes, when we teach this, we always say slurred speech. I don't want you to get hip to just slurred speech. Inability to speak. I know what you're saying to me, but I can't get those words out, okay? Sometimes you might get baby babble. You might get a word salad. I want to tell you this chair is green. And I say building, here, color, but I can't say that chair is green, okay? Sudden changes and time, okay? Suddenly. So 2 million brain neurons every minute, your brain goes without oxygen and nutrients. Sudden onset. I was perfectly fine 5, 10, 20 minutes ago, and suddenly I'm like this. Any of these symptoms present, it is now time to get on the phone and call 911. Very, very important. Do not ever try to drive yourself to the hospital while you might be having a stroke. You don't know what side or what area of the body it's particularly going to affect. It could be your dominant side. And theoretically, it is more common to have a stroke on your dominant side. So if you are a righty or a lefty, whichever, that side that you use most often, typically it will happen on that side. So very, very important to activate, call 911, or if you have someone at home with you, have them safely drive you to the hospital. There's a series of things that we can do at the hospital to make sure that we identify, one, is this a stroke? 2, what type of stroke is it? Is it a clotting stroke? Is it a bleeding stroke? And then we give you different treatments based on that. The one thing I always try to reiterate with all my patients, friends, family, Do not wait. The longer you wait, the more damage is occurring. The longer you wait, the harder it is to intervene and correct it. Now, when I first started to learn about stroke way back when, ignorantly, I said, stroke is a life sentence. You have a stroke, they're gonna put you in a corner and that's it. I remember my grandfather, when he had a stroke, he was never the same. He was never the same. But stroke is not a death sentence. I've seen people walk out of my hospital. I've seen people say, that was a rough day, but I'm doing better today, right? So making sure you, one, waste no time, two, know your risk factors. Have that conversation with your doctor. Have the hard conversation. No one really likes to do it, but it is necessary. And make the right decision for yourself. You can be stroke-free. Questions for you? Any questions? Okay. But there's no questions. Thank you guys today, and you guys are all going to remember to, yes?
Aaron has a question.
What about treatment modalities?
We're online.
Treatment modalities. So what types of treatment? That is an excellent
Can
question.
you repeat it again so we can get it online?
Yeah, I was concerned about treatment modalities you have for both hemorrhagic and for ischemic strokes.
Okay, excellent question. So I'll start with ischemic stroke. So for ischemic stroke, our number one choice of treatment, which is an FDA-approved medication, is called alteplase. It is it falls under the category thrombolytic, and the best way to explain it, it's like a very strong blood thinner. So what it does, we give it to you via IV. Now this is a time-sensitive medication, and this is why I always reiterate to people, it is very important, once you identify these symptoms, come to the hospital right away. So once you come in, the team has an hour for us to identify this is what's going on and make the decision. It's given to you via IV, goes over about an hour, and it finds the clot, starts to eat away at the fibers holding this clot together, and allows blood to move nice and fluid. So that's for ischemic. Another treatment that we sometimes use, and this is strictly based on the vessel and the location of the clot, is something called a mechanical thrombectomy. Now this is where your provider will go in with a guide wire through one of your main arteries and fish up to your brain. For the most part, we find the clot, we attach to it, and we manually remove it. Now that is it's very important to know that the location of the vessel is the primary driver of if that technique is used, because we will go in larger vessels. The further up in the brain the vessels go, they get smaller. So what we don't want to do is add an insult to an injury, so we would never go on your more distal or further up vessels, because it's too small. Now for your hemorrhagic strokes, one of the things that I didn't say is what causes hemorrhagic strokes. Number one cause is hypertension. Hypertension. Our bodies can adjust to having our blood pressure slightly higher for a period of time, but not an extended period of time. Extended period of time, what happens is you literally cause this wear and tear. So you have areas of the vessel that now become very, very thin and easily break. So with each pumping of your heart, you might just tear through that wall, and that's where you have your bleeds occur. So there's several different techniques depending on what type of bleed it is. If it is intracranial, which are the deeper penetrating vessels, your physician, based on the size, might say, I don't want to do anything with it except control the blood pressure, and we allow the body to do what it's created to do, and it absorbs itself. Now, if it's caused by something called an aneurysm, where there's a bubbling in the vessel, there's different techniques that we'll do. We can clip it, we can coil it. But this is all the decision for this is made after carefully assessing the imaging and seeing what it is, where it is, and how we want to attack it. Yes.
Somebody behind.
Any side effects from that?
Connect the place?
I was going to.
So yes, there are side effects. So one of the most common side effects that can occur, number one side effect, and we do have to tell you, it's an adverse effect actually, is bleeding. So it is a major blood thinner. It is very, very potent, very, very strong. So there is a potential that a patient might have bleeding at the end. And bleeding can occur anywhere in the body. We do have to tell you that, sometimes in the brain, but the risk for that is very, very low. Another effect that sometimes happens, especially in African Americans who take something called an ACE inhibitor, you might know it as lisinopril, is what we call angioedema, oral lingual angioedema, and it is an allergic reaction to the medication that usually causes swelling around the nose and mouth. If this did occur to someone, we would stop the medication and we would give you an antihistamine, flush it out of your system with fluids, and then continue to monitor and treat you conservatively. Yes?
You mentioned about waking up normally and then have the sudden changes. But can the stroke happen
While you're sleeping? Absolutely, absolutely can. And that is actually one of the studies that we're looking at now. Patients who go to bed completely fine and they wake up with symptoms. Why this has to be looked at and why it's challenging for medical professionals is when we're thinking about our medication alteplase, which is, as I said, is time sensitive, we always have to ask the question. If you went to bed at 8 p.m. and you woke up at 6 a.m., did your symptoms start at 8:01 or did they start at 5:59? So that's the biggest challenge. So utilizing imaging, advanced imaging, where we get different cuts of the brain and more high detail that says this area of the brain is being fed by blood and oxygen, this is absolutely not, this is how much tissue death has occurred. We can now utilize that to make a determination. Can we actually be equally as aggressive with this patient as the patient where we have a fine cut of the last time they were normal and the time of onset of symptoms? Okay.
I met someone who said, they said, oh, this could never be a stroke. So can you tell us if confusion, they're just so, people are confused. I know you mentioned, but we didn't see it. Could that be a sign of a stroke?
Absolutely it can. Absolutely can. So where do we always see this? We see it a lot in our elderly clients, and this is where we put on our investigator hat, and we have to really assess this patient. What is confusion? What is altered mental status, which our doctors hate to say, and we really dig through. When did this start? Is this normal? How confused is this individual really? And you decipher, okay, is this something? Oftentimes what our physicians will do is err on the side of caution. We will treat you and then reevaluate you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, for someone who's had a stroke in the past, what is the likelihood or percentages that can reoccur again?
Okay, so that's an excellent question. So a history of stroke. If you are not appropriately managing the risk factors of what contributed to that having a stroke, you do have a 20% likelihood of having another stroke. So I'd have a lot of patients. There's a stroke that I didn't talk about that I'm going to actually go back a bit. It's called a TIA, transient ischemic attack. Most patients will call it a mini stroke, and it's very highly disregarded. Why? So it's transient. Symptoms are there, and then they go away. Patients say, I feel great, it's solved, my body did what it was supposed to do. Technically, it did do. So this is an ischemic stroke. There is a clot that's lodged in the vessel. It's limiting blood flow to a particular part of the brain, right? It dislodges. It dislodges, or the body absorbs this little clot, and you don't have symptoms anymore. You feel good, all right, I'm back to normal again. The problem with this is, where does that clot really go? No one really knows. So what happens is, I like to tell my patients that this is a warning sign for you. This is your body saying, you need to check yourself out. Something is going on, and if you don't control these risk factors, the hypertension, the diabetes, the high cholesterol, you're going to have a major stroke within at least 20 days. But to your question, 20%. So some patients leave, they feel absolutely better. I feel back to myself, you fixed me. That is not a cue to stop. That is a cue to say, hey, let me really look at myself. What has happened here? What do I need to make sure I'm keeping my eyes on and keep on top of?
Okay. Why you gave some age factors when you just started. If you're over 50, going on to you're
55.
more susceptible to strokes. But that's not the norm these days. We
That is
see a
absolutely not.
lot of young people having strokes and heart issues.
Yes.
Do you have any answer to
Why?
why?
So, yes and no. Yes and no. So the verdict is still out on why. So one of the things that I like to say is, yes, I said that the risk of stroke doubles after the age of 55, but never said, I'll never tell anyone it's not there prior to the age of 55. I want to tell you, on Thursday, my youngest stroke patient since being a stroke anything was 6 years old. Was 6 years old. 6 years old. She was 6 years old. One of the things that we are pushing for doctors to tell our community is, if you have sickle cell, you have a very high risk, especially a child with sickle cell. A child with sickle cell has a very, very high risk of having a stroke, and in all my career, I saw it for the first time this week. So I say that to say, stroke has no age limit. It has no age starter, it has no age cap. It can happen at any angle of the spectrum, okay? We are seeing it in a lot of younger people. I think during 2020 to 2022, it was 30 to 40-year-olds. For whatever reason, they were having strokes, and some people might say, oh, it's related to the vaccine, or it's related to the diets, or it's related to... There's a lot of things. The verdict is still out. We're not sure what is causing it, but we're now looking at this clientele and taking a deeper look at what is happening to the bodies. There's been an uptick in cardiac arrest, and if you notice, they're like 18 to 20-year-olds. Ideally, this should not be happening because you're at your optimal state of health at that age. So I say this to say, it is a lesson to say we need to make sure that we're looking at ourselves and assessing these risk factors from all spectrums. Following up with the children, especially now that it's back to school, making sure they're going in and getting their checkups, looking at these things, because oftentimes these are underlying things that you think, oh, this could never happen to me, and then it happens. So yes, hopefully that answered.
Another question. You have 6 markers, right? Balance, pace, speech, and those things. If a person presents with 2, would that raise a red flag? Or if a person comes up with 2 of the of those things, would you still raise a red flag? Or you have to have all the symptoms?
That raises a big red flag. You could present with 1 and my flag's up. If you present with 2, I'm still running. If you present with all of them, I'm running very, very fast. I'm always running very fast. But every individual is different. Some people will have 1 or 2, some people might have all. It really is dependent, and oftentimes it's dependent on what stage of the infarct you are. It might just start in your language center, and I might just seeing a stuttering effect now. You can't get those words out, or you're finding issues, and that's okay. And we're still gonna treat you. We still need to examine that. But maybe by the time you got to the hospital, it went from slurred speech to now, hey, listen, I can't lift my arm. Okay, so as the time goes by and we have more tissue death occurring, this infarcted area is getting larger, you might see more and more of these symptoms. Yes.
Yeah, I have a friend, she's in her 60s. I believe she started having her stroke from maybe 40s, in her 40s. What do you think would eventually happen to her body?
That's a hard question.
Because she's been going in, well, since I knew her, she had a stroke about 3 times now. 2 major ones.
2 major ones. Do you
And
know
she
if they
got-
were bleeding strokes or ones that were the clots?
I think it was more clot.
The clots, okay.
Yeah.
So what happens is it gets harder to treat, I can say that, because you have more areas where there's tissue death, right? You will notice that over time she might exhibit more deficits. Maybe the first stroke she just had a right-sided difficulties, weakness, or inability to really be as strong as she is on the other side. If the stroke is occurring on the same side of the brain, you will always see more deficits on that side. My philosophy is, and concern is, when it starts to affect the other side of the brain. And we can't really determine or predict what side of the brain a clot is going to necessarily occur. So if it starts to affect the other side, then you're going to have more problems, okay? So what you would see is, after a while, the symptoms or the deficits are going to go higher and higher until technically the body kind of goes to a vegetative state. And that's where you have a major stroke and you wiped out a hemisphere. Hopefully that will never happen, though.
From a scientific standpoint, is this a myth, or is there some factual science to cayenne pepper helping stroke victims?
That's a myth. You want to know, I had a conversation with I was having a conversation with my grandmother, and she goes, garlic helps everything. It does. I believe that garlic does have it. So a lot of these natural ingredients, they do have body healing properties. That is the truth. Over time, they can be beneficial. I find that most of the time where we miss and we seem to get underwhelmed is when it's happened, the incident has happened, and now we want to have all the cayenne pepper and all the garlic. So that's where sometimes we get misconstrued. It's a lifestyle, right? You have to have been doing this for a long period of time, and your body's well acclimated. One of the things that I do like to reiterate, I am always for my holistic and natural treatments first before anything else. But I always want and tell people to just be a little open. Sometimes, even with our holistic treatments, we have to add a little bit of the medical interventions to help support that.
So you say that, is it every minute, 2 million
Yes.
cells?
So easily said, after the first 10 minutes of an infarct, you start to have tissue death.
Oh.
Every single minute after that, every 1 minute, that's 2 million brain neurons.
Okay, so you have patients that come in with severe symptoms, and then they recuperate. So what happened?
Complete recuperation?
What happened to the cells? Did they die, or what happened? Just explain.
So they've died. So that's where I would call that a TIA, the transient ischemic attack. So there was a clot. If I see a complete resolution within 1 to 24 hours, I classify that as a TIA. Now, is there tissue death? Yes. How extreme that is depends on the time that clot sat there and limited blood flow. And it also depends on the location. With all stroke symptoms, location is key, depending. So you might have a patient that comes and says, I cannot see anything for 3 hours. And on the 4th hour, my vision is back. It's definitely transient. It's relieved because blood flow is now able to go to that area. I always say we like to look back at these patients because your vision might not always be 20/20 after that. It might be 2019. You might have some deficits, not as easily picked up in the initial segments, but after time you will relook at that patient and you'll see those deficits actually are a bit more pronounced when we really focus in on them.
Okay, so you mentioned 24 hours, but what about those who, after weeks, they have rehabilitation therapy, and they can, move much better, even walk? So I'm just trying to understand about those cells.
So those cells are still gone, but we can rehabilitate the body, right? So when a stroke occurs, the tissue's dying. Why we don't have complete just death of one side of the body is because you have something called collateral vessels that still support the area, okay? It's like, I have to feed my side, but I'm gonna give you a little extra because you're my neighbor. I'm gonna give you a little extra to make sure you're okay, but we can't sustain this forever. So it still has a little bit of nutrition going to itself, hence the reason why we try to treat it as quickly as possible. So yes, we can treat patients. Some patients we treat aggressively, and some patients, because of timing, might need to be conservatively treated. But I always say after the stroke is the most important time, aggressive rehabilitation. Okay? When you come to the hospital, that's about 25% of your stroke journey. I have to identify what happened, I have to decide what treatment is appropriate, and then we have to talk about what happens when you go home? Because that's the other 75%. And this is where it is really at the core on you. You have to push yourself. I have patients who I was the homemaker, I did everything, now I've had this stroke. Do not get down on yourself. Keep pushing. Rehab is gonna come in and see you, and they're gonna say, okay, 2 hours a day, 5 times a week. I'm gonna push my patients 2 hours a day, 5 times a week. And even before you leave the hospital, I've encouraged my nurses, push our patients. I have a trick. I have a thing I like to do, I should say, it's not a trick. My patient comes in with a stroke, they have right-sided deficits. They can't use their right arm, they can't use their right leg. I will never stand on your left side and talk to you. Why? Because I know that side is perfectly fine. It's doing exactly what it's doing. I am going to start to prepare you for exactly what you're gonna experience when you go home. Everyone is not always gonna stand on your good side. Sometimes they might stand on your bad side. So now I'm going to force you to now try to train your brain will your brain to wake yourself up, do what you need to do, and activate, okay? It might not be 100% what it used to be, but we're gonna get you as close as possible.
I hope I'm not asking too many questions.
No.
Concerning, you say the risk could be modifiable or non-modifiable.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned collateral circulations.
Lateral circulation.
What can we do, or is there anything we can do to increase our collateral circulation to be used as a modifiable risk?
That's a good question. So controlling those modifiable risk factors,
Yeah.
Keeping the blood pressure down. What are my cholesterol levels, right? Because, why do we even consider cholesterol? Too much cholesterol in the body, where does it go? It starts to build up in the vessels. Building up in the vessels, it starts to become a clotted off pathway. It sits on the vessel walls until it closes off. So we want good collateral vessels or good collateral flow. You want to modify those risk factors, keeping your blood pressure low, making sure your cholesterol levels are low. If you're a diabetic, what are my blood sugar levels? What's my hemoglobin A1C? Because sometimes patients are like, no, I'm really good. I take my blood sugar medication, I eat very well, and then I do their hemoglobin A1C, and it's a totally different story, right? Communicate with your medical team. Don't tell us the things you want us to hear. You have to tell us the facts, right? So that we can help support you. Hydrate yourself. It's hot outside. I've heard a lot of people having heat strokes and passing out. Well, how much did you drink today? Hydrate yourself. Exercise. Keep your body moving and working at all times. And that will be the best way to support those collateral vessels.
I thought it was going to say stand on your head.
Well, I can't do that. So.
Any more questions?
Well, I sincerely thank you guys for your time. I thank you for all your great questions. They were wonderful. And I encourage you, please, number one, know your numbers. If it's rounding the end of the year, and if you haven't seen your doctor, go and see your doctor. Have a conversation. Hey, doc, how am I doing? Yes? Yes.
It is said that Seventh-day Adventists live at least 10 years longer than non-Seventh-day Adventists. Do you have an answer for that?
I have no answer for that, but as soon as I leave here today, I'm going to research that so that the next time I come, I have a good answer for that. Thank you guys for having me today. As I was saying, yes, no, go ahead.
I've heard that a person can get 3 strokes.
Yes.
That's the most somebody can get, right?
Nope.
Oh, it can be more than that.
Yes.
Because recently I've heard of one lady getting 9 strokes, and she was actually on life support, but she came back. So I just wanted to find out if
There is no cap.
okay.
There is no cap. How much your body is willing to push after that. But I've had people have a complete shower of strokes. I've had people come in and say, well, I've had like 6 TIA. And I'm like, that's a stroke too, but we don't consider it because we've resolved. And my next question is, okay, well, what are you taking? Oh, I don't take anything because it resolved. I felt good. And that's where my worry comes. So there's no cap to how much you can have. But what I would say to that individual is, if you've had 3, let's now start to talk about why is this happening? Let's really take a good look. Why is your body developing these clots? It sounds like it's a clotting issue. Why are we developing? Where are they coming from? And what do we need to do to reduce it or stop it from happening? Okay. So thank you guys. I want you guys to always remember to be fast, please. If you have or if you see someone exhibiting these symptoms, please call 911. Get them to the nearest emergency room. But as the year is about to end and we're about to go into the holiday season, which can be a very stressful season, and we're eating lots of good food because it's the holiday season, please make sure you make time to speak with your healthcare professional. What are my numbers? What are my risk factors? What do I need to do to improve it? Okay? And always be fast. Thank you. Yes?
Thank you so very much. Oh, we have another question. You see how good this is?
Okay, we have a lot of Caribbean people here, Jamaican, so I'm going to ask this question. Is it true about if somebody's having a stroke to put a nutmeg in the jaw, in the mouth?
That's going to go with my garlic statement. So no, it won't help at that time. And I would actually advise not to put anything in the mouth, simply because depending on the location of the stroke, I don't know how much is being affected, and I want to make sure that you swallow and you can swallow appropriately. Because if it doesn't go in the stomach, guess where it goes? It goes into the lungs. And what you don't want is someone to aspirate. Aspiration pneumonia is caused by mouth products getting into the lungs. You get pneumonia, right? But 25% of patients with aspiration pneumonia and a stroke will die, okay? So please don't put anything in anyone's mouth, okay? Thank you, guys.
Okay, is it for real this time? Sounds that way. Thank you so very much, Karelle, Spence, and your daughter, your lovely daughter. Thank you all for coming, not only you, it was an inspiring speech, a very informative one, and as you see, we had many questions. And so it's our duty now to go out and to tell everybody, because that's what we do, right? We get information, we don't keep it, we tell everybody. And when you come back, then we'll have more people to hear more about stroke. So thanks to everybody. It was a wonderful day. Thank you so much, Melanie, for having Karelle come over and give us this very inspiring speech that is it's necessary at this time. A lot of people are having strokes, and we now know we were taught fast, but now we have to remember, be fast. Okay, so that's our buzzword, be fast. Yes, because I know, and thank you so much, because I did that to my mom. My mom, she has atrial fibrillation, so she has strokes every now and then. So her left side, so we put our, it's a Facebook page, it's iPhone, it's a tablet. And I always say, Mom, look to your left, because she's not looking to her left. And now you understand why. She keeps looking to her right. I hear your voice, but where are you? And she looks to her right. And I say all the time, we put it to her left, so that when I call, I can tell her, look to your left. This is where my voice is. And so she does like this. And she looks. It's not easy. It doesn't come naturally. So thank you for explaining that one. Thanks, everyone. Have a blessed Sabbath day. Enjoy the rest of your Sabbath, and I hope you had a blessed Health Community Visitor Day. And we're going to ask you to pray to close. Be fast.
Heather, we have something for Karelle.
Oh, we do have something for her. Yes. Let's do the presentation first.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yes. Thank you. Let me get there. Let me get the other gift. On behalf of our church family, we want to thank you so much for being here and telling us all the things you told us. And this is a good reading, very good reading. So I'm just asking you to read and be blessed by it. And the flower is on behalf of our church. All right? Thank you.
That was worthy of an applause, that's for sure. That was a lot of wealth of information, because usually when we have things like this, I can look out in the crowd, I could see, half the people are asleep, but everyone was like, which was good, and it reinforces what we as a church teach. We teach about lifestyle and healthy lifestyle because it behooves us to have it. So in the long run and longevity of life, we are healthier at the end. And that's why we have so many centennials that are healthy on bicycles at 100 years old. So thank you for the wealth of information. Thank you for also reminding us that, yes, holistic is great. It's what you actually would prefer, but let's not deter the idea when we do need medication at that point. I think that was an important factor for me that you said that, because sometimes we can be ignorant. We could learn things and realize we could be fanatical sometimes. So we got to make sure that we incorporate all of God's goodness and all of God's wisdom that he bestows upon everyone. So you blessed us, so thank you so much. Let's bow our heads and let's pray. Gracious Father in heaven, we are grateful and thankful for this hour that you gave us here. You cleared our schedules. You allowed us to fill our bellies and fill our mind, and you fed us with food. And, Lord, you really blessed us with some dessert today. So we thank you, Lord, for bestowing upon us such a rich blessing and understanding how we're to continue to take care of our bodies and how we are to make good blood. The Bible tells us that the life is in the blood. So, Lord, we need to make good blood, and we pray, Lord, that we can do everything necessary from hypertension to diabetes to high blood pressure, all the things that can cause these issues in life. But, Lord, continue to bless us, point us in the proper direction, and continue to pour out your goodness to us, Lord. I ask, Father, a special blessing upon our dear doctor and her daughter and her entire household, and may you continue to have your angels watch over her and each and every one of us here. Bless us as we depart, and keep us safe with your heavenly angels. This is what we ask. As we ask it, in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Remember, be fast.